Like,
But that would be a great way to, put the hammer down.
Hi, Rebecca. I called you back
Or
today,
they
but
just
you
do
didn't
it.
answer. Fine. I just want you to know my phone.
study. Welcome to everyone who's in the room and our counselors on Zoom and anyone else on Zoom. The topic for tonight is to consider ideas that have been circulating for some time now on the idea of including a community center in the scope of work to look at revisioning the concourse and other areas adjacent to downtown. So we would love to hear from anyone who has thoughts on that matter. Just come up to the podium and state your name and then share your thoughts. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Cindy Jacobs, and I'm representing the Waterville Public Library tonight. I live in Ward 4. A community center has always been a very interesting concept for the library. A lot of what we do at the library is a community center. I know that some of the things that have been talked about is having, space for music lessons and various things like that. We at the library obviously are a little tight on space. I think most of you actually know that. I can barely get a space to have a meeting in the building myself. But we are working towards getting the building reopened. It's actually in the last phases of getting the 3 emergency exits on the north side of the building completed. But at this time, I also decided to share a problem that's going to also come up for the community center, which is parking in downtown Waterville. The library has needed designated same side of street parking for decades. We found an article back from 1946 that the community requested parking for the library. We still don't have parking for the library. The specific need for us would be about 12 to 20 same side of street designated parking spaces. A building of our size, which is about 18,000 square feet of workable space, would normally require 30 to 35 spaces. We really feel, honestly, with the concourse right across the street, that 12 to 20 would be just fine. It's primarily for our elderly patrons and our moms and that have young children with them, which actually is 80% of our normal patrons are under 5 and over 60. The concourse actually, we've actually explored this, with the city manager's blessing. We've, between the city engineers and the city council and the library, we've actually come up with 3 different ideas, one of which was approved by the Maine DOT, none of which have gotten very far yet. I'm hoping that something will come to this, but we really do need to address the parking for, something that's here already. The north end of the concourse is very busy, and it gets busier every day. The concourse is a municipal parking space, and I've noticed all summer long it's busier. Now it's really busy. Everybody's back to school. Everybody's doing what they're doing. It's just a busy place. I mean, there's a lot of cars coming and going and a lot of people walking. The pedestrian safety issue in that area is really not very good. I'm not going to go into all of that. At one point, Appleton Street wasn't even cut through there. And I don't know if many of you know this, but in 1962, when Waterville chose to make Main Street and Front Street one way, they needed an area to cut, they wanted access to get off of Main Street. So if any of you know, you go up Appleton Street and there's actually a big jog in the road. And it was cut through the Lombard apartment buildings and the library. That was all green space. And so it's sort of an unnatural road to start with because it wasn't built that way. And because of that notch, it's caused a lot of pedestrian issues. It's caused line of sight issues for cars and pedestrians. And it's just a very difficult, dangerous section of town. And we are the library, and we normally, when we're fully open, we have 300 to 400 patrons a day coming to the library. That's a lot of people coming and going from a place that does not have any parking. And the last thing I would like to share with all of you is from an economic perspective with the library. We, just as recently as last week, we are always trying to raise funds for different projects and programs that we would like to do. And over the past 6 months, in talking to various funders, They love the library. It is a national award-winning library for service to the community, which is what we won the medal for. It's a library that prides itself on welcoming everyone at all times. We really, that's who we are. Funders want to fund us. I have never been so embarrassed 3 times in a row in the past 6 months to have someone say to me, "We would love to give you money, but you have no parking. How do you expect to grow or even service the needs that you have?" So I guess on that note, I'm going to say, before we talk a whole lot more about adding more community center spots down here, we really need to figure out what we're going to do about the people we already have down here. I'm fully in support of a community center. I could have a list, the length of my arm of things that could be done there. It could be music classes. It could be, there are just hundreds of different things that you can offer. And there are things that I know that we could do jointly with the library. But until we can get people safely to and from these places, it will be very difficult. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, that's all I have to say. Okay, yes?
Do you have an idea of where parking could be?
We've come up with a few ideas. I'd rather really not talk about them right now, just because, it goes through the city, and the city council would vote on it and all of that. And it's up to the engineers and all that. So, that's one of the things we're hoping to explore more of. We've come up with as many ideas as we can think of. We're hoping that someone else can take a fresh look at it and maybe come up with some other ideas. It is kind of a difficult spot. It's a difficult spot, other than picking up the building and moving it somewhere else.
Your funders that you spoke of, did you express that you had ideas for parking, and would they fund a study on that?
No. Yes, they know that we're interested in that. These are funders that are interested in funding programs for the community. They don't want to fund a parking study or anything like that.
I'll just add that parking is squarely within the scope of this study, and I.
So I'm not out of line.
I do appreciate your comments, and I think we know that, and have expressed that parking for the library is a top priority for the city, and it's certainly a need. So that will certainly be addressed.
Great, and we're willing to work with everyone. We're an open book. We'd like to, we'll volunteer any services that we can to support that effort. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak? Thank you. I do like paper. Oh, rather old school.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel Pariser. I'm in Ward 4.
Leah Gerardin, also, Ward 4. And Diane Weinstein, Ward 6.
And we got together and wrote a resolution that we would like the town council and the city manager and the assistant city manager to consider, and folks from Colby and the BBB group to consider as part of how this plan is going to go forward for the downtown area. And I'm just going to read it, and then if there are questions, and Diane and Leah are going to read the names of people that have signed it already. So there's names on the actual resolution of folks that have signed it and agree with it.
It's going to be a group reading.
Yeah. So this is a resolution for Waterville City Councilor, City Manager, the BBB study firm, and Colby operations personnel. And I think Paul is here from Colby, so we have one representative there. So the statement of purpose: we, the undersigned, believe that the following resolution, if adopted by the Waterville City Council and Colby College in coordination with the BBB group, will help our city create a quality process for the proposed study plan being undertaken to revision the center of our town. our values, a statement of values. We believe Waterville needs to be a community that serves the needs of all of its community members, from those with the least financial means to those with greater financial stability. We envision a center of town with robust public, commercial, art, recreational, and residential structures that welcome people of all social, cultural, racial, and economic backgrounds. Principles of inclusion. The formation of the Center City Plan shall include the input and evaluation of all members of the greater Waterville community, such as people of low and no income, as well as people of greater financial means, elderly and retired individuals, residents or representatives of surrounding communities who use Waterville as a commercial center, area youth from all of our schools at all grade levels, including our alternative program, the Home for Little Wanderers, and our local charter schools, and our business community. Principles of process. Input. In order to solicit the most complete input, we recommend that the study reach out to all of these groups in the following ways. Hold meetings in places that the groups above would naturally gather, such as the local soup kitchen, food pantries, the Muskie Center, the South End Teen Center, the Alphonse Center, the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce, elementary, middle, and high schools, and local colleges. Offer access through digital platforms such as Facebook, SurveyMonkey, and the Waterville City webpage, so people could register their opinions that way. And continue to host these monthly, are they monthly or bi-monthly city council meetings where you're getting input? Is it monthly?
We meet bi-monthly.
Okay, and so each of the meetings is going to have a time before it like this? Okay, cool. Thank you. So recommended, so we had some elements that, actually one other piece. Revision and comment. The groups listed above will also be given the opportunity to comment on drafts of the plan as they are formulated by the study group. And then we had a few recommended elements. We recommend that the focus groups cited above be asked for their responses to the following design elements for the Center City Plan. So in other words, when those meetings were held with people, we might ask them what they thought about creation of a centrally located community center that would also provide a cooling and warming space for local residents and access to relevant services, public restrooms, housing with a substantial number of units meeting low affordable income criteria, a transportation hub, adequate sheltered and outside parking that facilitates all-season access to downtown commercial buildings, City Hall, the library, the Shupf Center, the Opera House, the new community center, residential buildings, the riverfront, and ensuring that there are adequate and conveniently placed ramps and sidewalks for strollers, walkers, wheelchairs, and so forth. An attractive outdoor space for community members to congregate, relax, and enjoy each other, and landscaping that's environmentally harmonious, utilizing native species with the hardscape that includes shaded areas and floral paintings. So now we're going to read the names of the folks that signed this document and then take questions.
Beginning with Nancy Sanford, Ward 1, Diane Weinstein, Ward 6, Lee Jeriden, Ward 4, Emmanuel Pariser, Ward 4, Don Smallage, Ward 1, Anna Thomas, Ward 2, Gail Davison, Ward 1, Kim Lane, Ward 4, Roger Phelps, Ward 2, Nancy Williams, Ward 6, Elizabeth Leonard, Ward 4, Amy Murphy, Ward 2, Hillary Koch, Ward 4, Linda Woods, Ward 4, Ken Eisen, Ward 6, Ray Winship, Ward 5, Constance Woodchip, Ward 4, Alicia Wilcox, Ward 4, Stephen Lauder, Ward 4, Elizabeth Schiller, Ward 4, and
Marianne Bernier, Ward 4, Mona Jarman, Ward 4, Claire Protnicki, Ward 4, Donald Banton, Ward 2. Richard Thomas, Ward 3. Peter Harris, Ward 6. Deanne Dees, Janine Dees, Ward 4. Suzanne Wolf, Ward 4. Is that it? Oh, there's a few more. Joanne Matusas, Fairfield. Kathleen Haberstock, Oakland. Brad Sherwood, South China. Sandy Olson, Troy. And Greg Rosel, Troy. Or Rosel. How do you pronounce that?
We apologize for any names we mispronounced, or if we did get a word incorrectly. We tried our best.
So if there are questions, we're happy to entertain anything that you're wondering about.
I don't know, Ward 4 is pretty active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ward 4. Go Ward 4.
I do have a question. What is meant by a transportation hub in this case?
Good question, yeah.
We know that many folks who live in our community do not have access to their own transportation. Many people are elderly or disability, and we want to make sure that there is a central location for public transportation. We'd also love to see the city expand its offering of public transportation, but public transportation must stop, in our downtown center area. And while this study is not necessarily about funding more transportation, that should that be part of our city's goals and priorities, that would be important for a revisioned community to serve all of its people. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm a troublemaker.
Tom.
Counselor Klepak.
Thank you. Yeah, I really support the spirit of what you're trying to get at in your proposal here. However, and like genuinely do. I feel so happy to live in a community where a neighborhood like what must have happened in Ward 4 gets together and is really invested in the future of Waterville and what it looks like, and making sure to keep an eye out for some of the most vulnerable people in Waterville. My concern is simply about some of the details of the language. As it was written, I feel like there needs to be a draft revision to what you have written there before I would support that. Just to like tighten up what you're trying to communicate, and in a way that still allows the process the like flexibility it needs to be able to proceed. For example, you mention as one of the stakeholders the members of surrounding communities in Oakland. You don't even necessarily enumerate that beyond a few people whose signatures you garnered. I'm not exactly sure how that works. For example, I'm not obviously denying that those are important people, and we want them to come to Waterville. It should be a place that's inviting to them, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't really know how we would solicit that kind of input and what kind of weight we should give to that sort of input in a way that's not particularly cumbersome. That's just an example. So what I personally would recommend is, if we have time here, is going back and refining the language and actually thinking about the effect of what that resolution might be. Those are just my thoughts.
Go ahead.
I just had a question, and
If someone's speaking, you gotta speak into the microphone, because I can't hear anything.
Elizabeth Leonard, Ward 4, and a signer of this statement. Isn't there a comprehensive plan committee in place in the city that has members who do not live in Waterville? Is that not am I mistaken that it was not a requirement to be a resident of Waterville to be on the comprehensive plan committee for Waterville?
That is correct, but I believe there's only one person.
Still, it's the same principle, right? Which I found
Yeah, but-
actually kind of interesting. But anyway.
Dr. Leonard, if I may though, that's true, and I'm not trying to minimize the importance of that group of people, but I'm also just drawing attention to the language that's in their proposed resolution, which I think is on this point, that point, for example, amongst others, is a little bit ambiguous and could be interpreted in different ways, and is not easy to interpret or perhaps implement. Like I'm not really sure what that is suggesting for the actual way the process proceeds. I'm not denying its importance. I'm asking for work to be done to refine the language that you're bringing before the council is all I'm asking.
Tom, we gave a couple of suggestions to folks who are the most difficult to reach in very specific locations. I do think perhaps since our city council meeting is open to anyone and does not exclude people from other communities, and I believe at a discussion 2 weeks ago there was someone from another community, this might be the more typical location where someone from another community might want to speak, since it's been publicized in the local paper that these discussions are going on. I don't think we're averse to modifying the statement. I think we were just trying to remind folks that Waterville, while we care significantly about people of various social and economic means of Waterville, we also know that we are the hub for central Maine. But again, we did not specify any specific location going out of the community for the BBB group. But again, this would be a good location if they came to this meeting. Mayor, are they open to coming to our meeting to speak publicly, anyone from another community?
Are you asking if somebody else from another community?
Yes, if someone
Oh,
from Oakland,
absolutely.
yes, so they
Yeah.
could come here.
I would never stop somebody from speaking from
Okay.
another community. Absolutely. It's an open forum.
And I'm not sure that BBB doesn't have anybody from other communities as well on their committee. I'm not sure who is involved in their actual planning design, so.
Yeah. What I'm getting at then, I mean, you're pointing out a access that already exists, and perhaps you're just making it more explicit by putting it in language, or are you asking for some additional outreach to surrounding communities that's not here? It's not especially clear from what you're saying in that, and if that's the case, what's the vehicle for that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess.
So, like,
I think that we're very open to editing. So, if there is fine tuning that can be done, that I don't think there'd be any issue for us as long as it met the spirit of the document. And something like that, I think, would be worked out as to what's the practical way of inviting people for their opinions who don't live in Waterville but use Waterville. And I think we can figure that out. I don't see that as a big, maybe it needs to be articulated better, but I don't think it would be that hard to figure that out.
Go ahead.
I just want to add, which was the point I wanted to make tonight, that I think the bigger issue, certainly an equally important issue, is how do we extend the invitation in a meaningful way to the people who live in Waterville to participate in this conversation? Because I know there was mention of ongoing meetings at the meeting 2 weeks ago. The only way I knew about the 6 o'clock meeting today really was because I took a walk with somebody who knew about it, and then I went looking on the city's website, and then I found the information, and then I posted it on the Facebook pages. And We simply have to do better. If these are public meetings, we have to, or if they're going to be public forums and the public is invited to be part of this process, they have to be brought into the process in a more meaningful way. That's the point that I wanted to make.
I agree with Elizabeth, only for the simple fact that I honestly thought the meeting was at 6:30. So. You see?
Yeah.
You know what?
Right.
Talk about how important it is to go out and talk with people.
Yep.
I think what's key is that we know that there are a small group of people that come here to the, city chambers, but we're talking about the future of Waterville for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so we think to make this greater effort to do outreach to places like the food pantry, to some of the schools and colleges, to some of the South End Teen Club, where there are people of a range of backgrounds. Because, again, we're talking about the future of Waterville for 50 years, for 5 decades, for perhaps more. And that's why this is lovely, but that's not true inclusiveness if we just limit it to this when we're talking about the substantive changes that can come from this revisioning. And we think it's a great process. It can be a great process. And I see you nodding, Flavia. Thank you.
Yes, yes, no, and I agree, and the reason because I'm doing a little bit of outreach, and I didn't know what's really going on in Waterville, not until I went to the soup kitchen. It really opened up my eyes into just listening to people's stories of how they got to where they are, and so we have a lot of work to do. Thank you for this.
And I guess just in terms of maybe next steps, Counselor Klepach, I don't know if I just murdered your name, but we're happy to sit down with a group of people and talk about the particular language if you all want to do that, in the resolution.
So, I think that would be fine, of course. I just want to add something. I mean, I appreciate this very specific and, urgent request for input from the community. I mean, and I think that it's great to see a member of the Colby community here, or faculty, staff, and this will also be passed on to BBB, the consultants. I just want, and it sends a very strong message. I also would say that these consultants have been hired because they are professionals at facilitating dialogues, and so I'm really eager to hear their ideas, and they may have some great ideas like this. I love the idea of going to venues around the city, like the soup kitchen, like the schools, including students specifically, going to where they're going to be likely to participate. I think that is really important to get a true, robust community input. But I think that, so I'm eager to hear what BBB thinks about this, and I love the ideas. I think it's really important. As you said, Diane, this is going to set the stage for decades, so we need to get it right.
Yeah, and it is the young people that are going to be here longer than some of us, so I think that it's really important to get their input, so I appreciate that. So let us know how we can work with you to refine it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none?
Does anyone have any ideas about a community center and what that would bring to our community? That was the topic of the evening, specifically.
Can we buy the Kenneset building?
I
Let's just put it in the Kenneset building. I mean, it's been sitting there empty.
Yeah.
guess I'll talk. I would say a community center would bring more resource, because there is a lot of people, I think, in Waterville that need extra resources. From just going over the at the food kitchen and just being around town a little bit more, just realizing that it's lack of resources where people get stuck. So, and also too, when I think about like even revitalizing the concourse, I think about moving it up with housing, a community center in the bottom, you have the shopping center, transportation was brought up. And I think that's a key point, especially to a downtown area, is having that transportation, is having like a little area where you can just go one stop, you get your resource, you get everything done there. So that's what I'm thinking when I envision a community center.
Councilor Klepak.
Well, thank you. Well, my thought is, I'm glad Flavia and Dr. Leonard and the other people that are coming are speaking for the marginalized, low income in Waterville, certainly that need resources. I think that is an important component of what a community center can be. I think there's more that a community center should do for the community, because the community is not limited to those people who, there are others in the community that also have needs. The Parisiers group mentioned youth. I think, there's certainly, Waterville is trying to position itself as an arts center, and there has been a lot of investment in attracting national and regional artists, but I think that there actually is a real niche. There's a need in our community for space that is specifically local, is hyper local, meaning I know for a fact there are a lot of teenagers in Waterville that have a lot of musical talent. And where do they play? Well, they play in the back room at the new record store downtown. Occasionally they'll play at the stage at Mainly Brews, which isn't an ideal spot for them. I feel like this is the kind of thing that, if you really want a community to be an art center, you need to feed the very grassroots of it. You need to give burgeoning art culture, youth art culture, a space to grow for music, for visual arts, et cetera. And it doesn't have to even be limited to the arts. There's all kinds of mechanical and trade related activities that young people can engage in. It would be really cool. I know Councilor McCormick would probably support this. It'd be really cool to have a bicycle project, a small workshop where people can learn how to work on bicycles and fix bicycles up. I think that a community center could serve, have blank space that can be used by various groups and repurposed with time. Because one thing that I think we should think about with a community center is that the needs of a community change with time, and so whatever we build, it should not be built in such a way that its utility is locked into where we are as Waterville in the year 2022. I think it should be a flexible space that can adapt as the decades shift and change around Waterville. And the needs of the community can be met in the year 2050 just as well as they're being met now by that space. So I think these are all considerations for the space. I mean, certainly Waterville has a low-income population and a homeless population that is resource limited. I don't imagine we're ever going to, eliminate the scourge of that problem. But, hopefully it won't be as pressing an issue in Waterville for decades to come as it is now. And what is that space going to be in the future? I think that's an important consideration. So those are my thoughts on a community center. I'd like to see a stage. I'd like to see where maybe perhaps practice space or some kind of workshop space where like a maker space where people can go in and make things. Maybe a tool library. Maybe this is the kind of thing that the library could coordinate with somehow. I'm not sure, but I think thinking broadly and creatively about what that space could be now and could be in the future is the correct way to think about that space.
He won't be able to hear you now up there.
Mayor Coelho, after you have one person online that would like to comment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just, as I was listening to you, I was thinking of one other space, and that is the Hathaway Shirt Factory. More than half of it's empty. And it's still within the area we're talking about, and it gives unlimited room for expansion for any number of things.
Can you bring that person in?
I did. It's Nancy Sanford. Nancy, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things, actually two of the things that I think I would like to see a community center be is like a welcome center for people coming to Waterville, like an information center. So, it's like, let's go to Waterville for the day, and we can go to the information center to find out about things that we don't know, that's available in Waterville. That's one thing that I've thought of. The other is that perhaps there could be a space, and actually this is a suggestion I've been thinking about because my friend Marilyn Canavan brought it up, is that somewhere in a community center there could be some space devoted to the history of Waterville. So folks could go in there. I personally like the idea of a community center because I live alone, and there are times that it gets lonely living alone. And so if there was a community center, I can envision myself going down and seeing who's there and what's going on and whatever else. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank
Paula?
you.
Paula Raymond, Ward 7, and as I'm listening to all this space that we have in the city of Waterville, one of the spaces that is near and dear to my heart is always the historical South End. And what I find interesting is that we talk about space as though it has to be contained in some way, trying to put everything in there. And we have the river. We have the Kennebec River. We have 4 parks. We have a ball field. We have a park where there are gazebos that you can have a picnic. People go there. I walk it almost every day down to the river, and I go to the boat landing, and I've taken pictures, and there are people who will fish. And I am an educator at Adult Ed, and we're working with the Green Block Art Studio to have a art program for our students in Adult Ed and our alternative ed students this year. And I invited those who are doing the art to come down and sit and have a picnic with me. They were amazed. I sent a bunch of pictures out on Facebook of key areas, and they're saying, where is this? Where is this located? This is beautiful. I want to bring my kid to go fishing there. It's in the South End. It's down by the river. We could go kayaking, canoeing, you could do boating, you could fish. You can go, I used to go all the way to Hollowell, park my kayak, my husband would meet me there, we'd have lunch, we'd shop a little bit, and then come back home in the truck. There's just really an expansion of activities that can happen in that neighborhood. And so I would encourage those of you who are talking about space to expand that idea and to come into a community that's been around for a long time and has some real healthy history, where you could learn a lot about the community and participate, be a part of it. And the Kennebec River is right there. What a gift that is to the city, the Kennebec River. And it's a safe place to moor your boats, your kayaks, let your children fish, and just sit and have a picnic, or bring a book and a chair and sit and read. It's very quiet in that neighborhood. It's a lovely place. So I would encourage us to do that.
Thank you, Paula. Anyone else? All right.
But there's a person on the line?
Nope, that was
Oh,
Nancy.
that's Nancy.
Yep. 6:49. Move on to the public hearing for amendment to Airport Municipal Park. Or do you want to take a 5-minute break?
We could press on, but I did not read the preliminary. I didn't open the meeting. I just started the public forum, so we don't want to do that at some point.
Don't we do that with the public hearing? It's just a public hearing.
You might want to start the meeting officially.
Meeting doesn't start till 7.
Yeah, okay, well, that's fine. That's fine.
Opening up for a public hearing on amendment to the Airport Park Municipal TIF and Development Program. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a public hearing that's required by Maine DECD in order to make any amendments to an existing TIF district. Councilor Frankie is the chair of the TIF committee, the advisory committee, and he, I believe, has a brief report and recommendation to make on this. And I think that would be an appropriate introduction for this hearing.
Okay. Councilor Frankie.
All right, the TIF committee met on August 24th with to discuss the TIF district at the airport. This district expires in November unless council votes to extend its term. It was noted that the original business for which the district was designed has moved to First Park. In the ensuing 20 years, there's been very little activity in the remaining district. Even though this district has a substantial footprint area-wise, last year the district only generated $27,000 in captured revenue. The recent sale of one of the parcels in the district resulted in the discovery of wetlands issues. So the city manager suggested that the district be re-examined to determine if it should be redesigned. In addition, the FAA may require that revenue from this district be devoted just to airport support. There was general agreement in the committee to recommend that council extend the current district for 2 years so that it can be reevaluated and determine whether it should be redesigned.
Any questions or comments? Any from the public?
Karen Heck, Ward 6. I'm not sure that this pertains particularly to this TIF, but I am concerned about the way TIFs are happening or given out, because I have tried to find out what's happening with the TIF that was given downtown to the Edith and Eaton block, and nobody responds when I sent them an email. There's no number to ask to get a comment on. And then when I wrote a letter to the editor to say, you know, maybe a public comment, I haven't heard from that either. And for 6 years, these people have had a TIF, and it's an embarrassment to the downtown to see what has not happened. And so my concern about this TIF or whatever TIF is that it seems as though we should have some ability to put parameters on and require. Has there even been a building permit issued for this place after 6 years? And it's just kind of aggravating that we're willing to give up tax revenue to help these businesses. And I'm feeling like we've been, for this one particularly, taken advantage of. And as far as the airport, I was a huge supporter of the airport after the last mayor sort of closed the fixed-based operator. So it's not that I have a problem necessarily with this TIF, but I'm wondering where the city's leverage is and what we might be able to do about that.
So, to answer the first part, I mean, the airport belongs to the city, so that's sort of a different kind of. I look at those TIFs a little differently than I do the ones that we hand out to everybody else, and I think the word you were looking for was duped on the Main Street one. I've had many conversations with Steve over the past few months over that property.
Sorry, who's Steve?
The city manager.
Oh, yeah.
And
okay.
We've been doing some research because I've asked if there's any way to like step that back, because that's not the only project I've asked about. There are some other projects that we've given TIFs to that nothing has happened to in 6-7 years. So that is absolutely something that we've been discussing internally to try to figure out what levers we can pull and push to get some of that stuff happening. What I will say is, even though we've given them a TIF, if they've done nothing to the building, they get no money back. They don't get a discount on their taxes. They still have to pay the same rate it was when we first gave them that TIF. So they get nothing back in those CEAs. But you're right, that we shouldn't be sitting on these for so long. There needs to be a mechanism that we can sort of push to be like, it's time. I mean, we've looked at other developments, and even as recently as a couple weeks ago, we were like, no, you can only have 2 years to do that project. Or no, you can only have 3 years to do that project. Well, we've been looking at this project. I was on the council when we gave them this TIF back in 2018.
16, I think it was.
For the Main Street one?
I think I found an article in the paper. It said 2016, I'm pretty sure. But I could be, you get what I'm saying, and I'm
Absolutely.
glad, I'm happy to hear that.
I think that City Hall as a whole has sort of started to figure out, a lot of those are put in place before we got here, and we're trying to figure out a way to sort of like apply pressure or unwind them if we can. Because you're right, I don't think that when we give 50% or 75% of their taxes back, we do so in hopes that they're going to do something with these buildings. Not to let them
Expectation, I wouldn't say hope, but
not to let them sit
expectation they
there
should-
for 10
right.
years. My fear is that some of these TIFs that have been had in the past, the owners will sit on them long enough to sell that project to somebody else, and the next person gets the tax benefits. And I think that we need to find a better way, or a way to scale back. If you haven't done anything in a couple of years, then it's done. I mean, I haven't seen, if you go to the Hathaway building, they're looking at 150 apartments or something like that next door.
I don't think it's that many, but 67 perhaps, something like that.
But in the first phase,
Yeah.
but then the second phase has another additional units.
Okay.
So, but that's a project where we've sat there watching them try to get funding. They're actively
They're
trying to
trying.
make something happen. I have seen nothing happen on Main Street.
Is there a building permit? Have they taken out a building
Not that I've
permit?
seen.
The old Atkins building.
Okay, that's
What was-
fine. Doesn't a TIF have expectations built into it? Because isn't it a state? Don't they, no?
So I think that if there's no development that happens, yeah, there's no, like the mayor said, there's no benefit to the person holding it, but the whole point of giving the TIF is to spur economic development and to have something happen. But the other thing is that there's a limited amount of area in Waterville that can be in a TIF district. And so if we're giving TIFs to areas that are not being developed, and and at some point we will reach our max, we want to make sure that we're not missing other opportunities. But in general, I think as you said, Karen, the expectation is that development will occur. and it needs to be encouraged.
Claude, you're the chair of the TIF committee. Is there anything we can do with those TIFs, or the ones that have been sitting out there that nothing appears to be happening to?
Well, the short answer, Jay, is I'm not sure legally what we can do once we've approved a TIF district, other than amend it, or I suppose technically we could end a district if it's not doing anything. But to your point earlier, Jay, is there's no downside to the city from inactivity. The owner still pays the taxes from the original value of the property. So it's in the owner's interest to go ahead and develop the property, because the development is what raises the tax rate. And if you've got a credit enhancement agreement that you need to have subsidized, why, that's the way that happens. But while it's disappointing to see projects that are not developing at the speed that we would like them, there's really, that's the only, missed expectations is the only downside for the city. As far as the area footprint, for Councilor Green, the downtown district doesn't count against the citywide space. That's why it's important for us to re-examine the airport TIF, because that's land that does impact our area limits on TIFs. Anyway, I'd be happy to discuss this further with anyone, even with members of the public. I'm quite accessible. I think, though, that we should go ahead and move this tonight's issue forward and have our regular our regular meeting.
I would just say that the downside would be that the building is just horrible looking on Main Street for 6 years. That is a big downside.
Councilor Klepak and then Councilor.
Yeah.
What's that percentage, Claude? The percentage, what is the actual percentage of the, and how do they demarcate downtown versus the rest of town?
Oh, that's the way we've designed our downtown footprint. It actually includes space down on in the south end, but as long as we designate it as a downtown TIF, it doesn't count against our area.
I see.
Standard.
And what's the area percentage? Is that mandated by the state or something?
Yes, it is, and I believe it's 5% of the overall area could be in a TIF zone, or maybe it's 15%. Anyway, I would have to look that up. I'll get back to you on that.
And our number is at what now?
Well, we're well below the number. However, we have the large airport TIF, which is taking up a substantial amount of our TIF zone outside of the. Anyway, I'd be happy to go into more detail, but the issue before us is to extend the airport TIF so that we can decide whether to redesign it or to end it, for that matter.
Right.
Klepak, Claude was right the first time. It's 5%, and I think we're at like 2.6 or almost 3. What are we at? 3.5 right now? Yeah. I think if we can cut out those wetlands that we don't need, we're not going to be doing anything with them. So we'll see. But Councilor Green, I'm sure we'll agree.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to prolong the conversation, but I do think it might be worth considering having some kind of report from TIF holders if there's no development happening, and just to check in and find out what's going on and whether the city can help.
or a conversation with the TIF committee. Could have a conversation with the realty partners.
Agree. Absolutely. I mean, it's the public's money. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? All right, so we're going to move this forward to the meeting. I'm going to take a 5-minute break before we start the meeting, so we can go to the bathroom. Or should we just start?
Sure. It's your
All right, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess before we start the regular meeting, just so everyone can stand up and stretch, because it looks like it's going to be a long one. We'll be right back. Good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Waterville City Council. There are agendas available in the file pocket near the entrance or on the city's website. All items appearing in the consent agenda are voted on in one motion and vote. Generally, these items are routine in nature and do not require discussion. All items listed under unfinished business or new business are voted on separately. First, councilors will be given an opportunity to speak, and then residents will be given an opportunity to speak. Citizens wishing to speak will be given an opportunity for comments or questions. Citizens must speak at the podium and identify themselves. Each citizen will be allowed one opportunity to speak and will be limited to 3 minutes. Finally, the councilors will be given another opportunity to speak or comment. Citizens that would like to speak about something that does not appear on tonight's agenda will have an opportunity to do so at the end of the meeting under the public comment section of the agenda. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Where's Rick's play ball? All right, disclosure of conflict of interest. Does anybody have any conflicts? All right, seeing none, I'm going to move on to the proclamation for Clean Energy Week. Rick, I hope you're watching because you asked us to do this. Whereas Maine is committed to a clean energy future and enjoys abundant forms of renewable energy that powers homes and businesses across the state. And whereas the generation of power from renewable sources, including forms such as hydro, wood, wind, and solar, account for nearly 4/5 of the net electricity generation in Maine. And whereas Maine has increased its renewable portfolio standard to 80% by 2030 and has a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050. And whereas Maine leads New England in wind power generation and ranks 6th in the nation in the share of electricity generated from wind, and whereas the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy ranked Maine 16th in its 2020 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard, and whereas Maine has established mandates to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% by 2050, and created the Maine Climate Council to provide recommendations to meet these targets. And whereas Maine clean energy jobs grow local economies and boost the state's workforce and economic development, and whereas National Clean Energy Week provides an opportunity for individuals, local governments, corporations, and other organizations in Maine to champion common sense solutions that address the United States' evolving economic and energy needs. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Jay Coelho, Mayor of Waterville, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim September 19th through the 23rd as National Clean Energy Week and urge all members of our community to recognize this observance. Done. All right, I'm going to move on to the presentation, land bank legislation. Is that Rob? Floor is yours, Robin.
Well, hi. My name is Robin Stanicki. I am a community planner with the Kennebec Valley Council of Governments. And I am here on the request of the council to talk a little bit about LD 1694, which was the legislation that enabled land banks on the municipal and the state level in Maine here in 2022. Thank you. So I put together a small set of slides to talk a little bit about what land banks are and what they are not. And at any point, if there are questions, I will pause after every couple of slides to give you all a chance to ask questions if that is okay. Okay, so a state land bank is in fact a legal entity. It is considered a legal authority to conduct certain types of activities with respect to municipally owned properties in Maine. So these are public entities. They have a unique set of governmental powers. And the governmental powers that they have that are unlike the powers that you may have had prior to this law include the fact that it has a legal mechanism to dispose of property and avoid certain types of penalties in a new way with respect to certain types of liabilities. So this is a unique governmental power, and it is focused on converting problem properties into productive reuse. So problem properties for this statute is defined as abandoned, derelict, vacant, abandoned, dangerous properties. A land bank is both fiscally advantageous, but it also is a tool. I'm sorry, did we lose the PowerPoint?
We did, but I'm bringing it back. I'm sorry.
If that's helpful. Oh, okay. So this is also a long-term planning tool that can be helpful if you're trying to carry out a larger vision within a town. Well, let's go to this slide here. This is a graphic that's really helpful to understand what the land banking process is. And I'll just pause really quickly to just say, you know, a land bank is titled such because, well, it's a bank. It operates much like a bank does in that you have deposits and you have withdrawals. They're just parcels of property rather than dollars and cents. So many of these properties come under municipal ownership in a variety of ways. And the municipal land banking legislation that was passed this year does not have any effect on, adds to, or detracts from any process that a municipality uses to acquire property at the present time. So the city of Waterville likely has a number of ways that it uses to acquire property, whether purchasing it outright, using a tax acquisition policy, or any number of ways using dangerous buildings code and others. So these are ways that we can acquire property as municipalities, and we would be able to use the land bank, transfer these properties to a land bank to do certain types of things. We can use them to extinguish liens. We can also decide to repair the property. We may also need to demolish the property. We may need to clear the lot, for example. We may also need to conjoin adjoining parcels. Or we may also decide that we want to split one parcel into two. We can also hold these properties tax exempt. We can treat each parcel differently related to any type of TIF incentives that we may want to use in redevelopment. And then we can also take that property and we would work with a buyer or a developer to turn that property into a project that the town would like to see. So in this graphic, it talks about sources of inventory. So this, as I mentioned, it might be a private purchase. It may be that a resident donates a parcel or a property to a town. You may swap a property with an adjoining town. But then, as I mentioned, you may also acquire that property through derelict taxes, dangerous property, other types of code violations, and any other either incentives or fee structures that may account for a reason to take that property. Let me see if I can see this a little bit more. The end result is that you're able to sell that property at the end of the day to another user to become something new. And now that property is contributing to the town, contributing to the neighborhood. It may not have been on the tax rolls. It may not have been producing any tax revenue, and now it is. It may not have been the right choice for a neighborhood in terms of it may have been an abandoned property. It might have been dangerous. It might have needed some environmental remediation. And so by putting it into the land bank, you have a legal entity with which to be able to do something with, to remediate some of those options. Next slide. So here are some of the advantages of how a land bank can help municipalities. So one of the first things is that a land bank, well, it's called a bank because it is a financial structure. As such, we have the ability of calling on federal funds to be able to both fund our own land banking here in Maine, but also on the local level, we're able to use some of that federal money to conduct some other types of projects here at the municipal level. Maine is only one of 17 other states in the nation that have a land bank as of August 2022. One of the advantages of that is there are multi-million-dollar funds available for Maine to take advantage of that are split only 17 and now 18 ways. So we're able to get those non-competitive federal appropriations, which is a mouthy term to really just mean we can raise our hand and we're able to draw down some of those funds. Right now, the working group is trying to iron out exactly what that process will be, but it has been my advocacy that we would not roll competitiveness into the application of those funds. So Waterville and other municipalities applying to the state for some of those funding, it would not be a competitive process. So some of the funding can be used for technical assistance. Some of this could be for remediation of environmental concerns. And then some of that can be also to repair, demolish a property, or make it otherwise attractive for the parcel to leave the land bank and go into the hands of the developer. What this also does is it means that if you have land in your town that needs to be dealt with, that it would more likely be able to be turned around much more quickly. So there's oftentimes instances where a town is disincentivized to taking parcels because those are problem properties. There is a lot of work to do on that property and no money to do it with. There are a lot of legal challenges to the property, and there is no capacity with which to untangle and wrangle those types of title and lien issues. And then there are also, the big one is the liability issues. Okay, the liability issues is a really, really big one. And that is because the state is not liable in the same way that a municipality is vulnerable to certain types of fees, fines, and other types of liability on the local level. And that can disincentivize any reason why a town might not want to take a parcel and do something with it. Okay, next slide. All right, I added a slide about community land trusts because I think it's important to understand a little bit more about what makes each of these initiatives different, just so that there's not any confusion. So a land bank and a land trust are similar, but they're complementary, but they are similar only in name. So we do know that Waterville has a land trust. These are nonprofit organizations. They are not also municipal structures. They have their own mission, vision, values, but they don't have any authority. So a land bank is a municipal structure. It also has a legal authority, and it has both mission, vision, and value, okay? So some of the points here relate to land banks and some of them to land trusts. So land banks can hold properties for a longer term, okay? So you might be holding on to a property because you have a larger vision of what your city would like to see. A CLT doesn't actually hold on to a lot of property. In fact, the only property that they really hold on to is the land that some of those buildings would be sat on. Property disposition. So land banks sell properties for a flexible price. You might be selling them to developers. You might be selling them to nonprofits. And most often those are going to be consistent with your community-wide goals. Whereas a CLT is really boxed in to a certain type of buyer, which can also limit some of the transactions that they will be doing. So there's a lot of difference there in land banks and land trusts. But the way that they do come together is that a land bank controlled by a municipal authority can also partner with a community land trust if there's some synergy with respect to their mission and what their long-term goals are. Okay, so next slide. Here are some best practices. I inserted a few slides here about best practices because at this time there is an enabling legislation that says a municipality can have a land bank. There's a period after that because you can have a land bank and Waterville can do anything they want to do with their land bank. A great example of a land bank that's similar in size and scope is the city of Sanford and their land bank. I believe that the city council did hear from the city of Sanford land bank director and getting a couple of ideas from them. There's certain ways that you can set up your land bank, but largely this is a tailored option. So there is the ability to adapt the structure, the function, a lot of different custom characteristics related to what you're looking to do, what types of projects and properties do you have that you need to take care of, and what you'd like to do with those properties. Things like organization. How will you have accountability in your governance? Will you create a new commission to oversee the land bank? Will you give your land bank the authority to make dispositions all unto its own, or will that continue to need to come back to the full council? Can they enter in interlocal agreements without the say-so of the full council? How will you staff your land bank? You might decide to have one or two independent staff, or you might share them among different departments. And then what's your function of your land bank? So this is anything from what types of property will be deposited into the land bank, who are you marketing those properties to, And then pricing, what are the pricing structures that you will have for these different properties? And who is allowed to bid on those properties? You know, these are things that you would craft as you go along in this structure. And then there's also future use definitions. So these are things like, how do you define public use? Is that a priority for some of your property disposition? Where will you get some of these properties? Things like that. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Next slide, please. One of the biggest things that I would recommend is that you start with looking at what you already have. So the next few slides will really just touch on ways that you can create a land bank that fit in and tie into some of the ordinances and goals that Waterville already has. So the number one thing I recommend is to look at your tax collection and foreclosure processes and make sure that they are understood, that they are streamlined, they're universally applied, because this is one of the biggest ways that land banks actually acquire property into their land bank. So they play an instrumental role in making sure that those tax delinquent properties actually move forward to another buyer. And also that these properties are being directed toward other buyers that the council and government feel are fair. Next slide. You'll also want to make sure that land banks align with some of your other tools and your programs within city government. So these are things, again, like tax collection. You want to make sure that your code enforcement department, they're right on top of these things. And then who is working on redevelopment efforts in your city? This also includes your economic and community development, your planning office, things like that. They're all going to have a lot of stake and say in how these properties can be identified, what types of maintenance or remediation needs to be done on a property to make it attractive for a identified buyer, and then what buyer is targeted for that property. Let's see, and it is a really great tool for returning vacant problem property to productive reuse, but it is not. You can't really use a land bank for every type of property, but you can certainly, with a lot of practice, be able to understand and identify the ways in which the land bank could be a good tool for one or two properties. Okay, next slide, please. Another best practice is to really give some thoughtful space to how to engage residents and stakeholders in the structure of forming your land bank. I say this because you can only begin things once, and it's a really great point in time to look at who really needs to be part of this conversation. And so many of the land bank structures include how to engage the community and who needs to be involved in some of those conversations as to what is the function of the land bank, where will some of those properties be held for long-term use, for example, and some of those other things, which again is part of the conversations within the city of Waterville as you continue to build this out. Because like I said, there's a lot of flexibility here. There isn't, a guidebook for you to, stay within the lines. but these are all things that you'll want to sort of check off, and they are fully customizable for your needs. And as I have mentioned before in other meetings, that, you know, Waterville's land bank can be as large or as small as your community needs it to be. If your community needs it to be small because the capacity of the government to run the land bank is small at this time, then that is certainly a good reason to keep it small. And, you know, like I mentioned, to transfer properties at that small pace, because that's what you're able to do. Next slide, please. So this is where I talk about those long-term land use strategies. So whether or not Waterville has you know, specifically articulable land use strategies that go beyond, you know, 5-year, 10-year, 15 years toward a larger vision. I can imagine that, you know, some of the downtown planning, you know, probably had some of that capability. You really kind of want to look at that when you're building out the function and the purpose of the land bank. So you're thinking about residential land parcels, commercial land parcels, empty lots, and you really want to think about what are the priorities for that particular property. You have a 3-unit apartment building on XYZ street, and this is probably an example of a property that you're not going to hold in your land bank for many years. You're going to try to find a buyer that is going to create more housing, because that's what's appropriate and that's what that house is, or that parcel is zoned for. There might be other properties that don't fit that same bill, and so you do need to build some flexibility into how that land's disposition will meet the need of that particular neighborhood. Next slide, please. I thought I had one more slide. I might have mixed up the last 2 slides. Oh, I did, the stakeholders. Okay. So I might also say that funding the land bank is an important part of the conversation. Many people have funded their land banks using seed money, you know, to just get it started. But a land bank, as it suggests, is its own self-funding mechanism. As you sell these properties, you're able to use that money as revenue, and then continue to build the cycle of buying and selling properties back and forth within the land bank. And the goal is that you're able to use this tool to look at properties in a different way. You might have properties that are on your tax rolls that the owner hasn't paid tax in several years, but you haven't been willing or able to take that property because it represents a whole new can of worms for you. This presents a different option for you to be able to do things like that. So you know, if we can just go through, anyone have some questions, we can kind of go and continue the conversation if there's some specific areas that I can cover.
Go ahead, Paul. You gotta go up.
I just wanted to ask a question.
Sorry. They can't hear you if you don't go up. Speaking of which.
Robin, Paula Raymond from Ward 7. I was just wondering if you could send us a copy of your PowerPoint presentation to, I'm on the Housing Committee, to Rebecca, and then she could forward it to all of us. She's the chair of the Housing Committee. And then it allows us to actually really absorb all the work that you've done. Is that okay?
I sure will, Paula. That's,
All right.
That's no problem.
All right, thank you.
It might also be helpful if I include in that PowerPoint, I can include some of the material that we distribute to municipalities that are looking for a deeper dive into the legislation. But then there's a lot of information out there on the internet with different types of national planning organizations that, you know, it is their business to understand the land banking business. And so there's a treasure trove out there of different guidebooks and case studies and examples and structures that can give you sort of a deeper understanding. But like I said, the way that we crafted this legislation was to absolutely respect home rule, to making sure that municipalities have the most amount of flexibility, because we're dealing with tiny towns of 711 residents, and then, you know, the largest cities in Maine are all dealing with whether or not they want to have a land bank. So we wanted to keep those equity measures intact, so there's a lot of flexibility here.
Patty, anyone online?
There is, but there's no questions, but Councilor Klepak has a
All right,
question.
Councilor Klepak? You're on mute.
Thank you, Robin, for that illuminating presentation. I learned a lot from you right there. I appreciate that. Can you tell me, just for my own curiosity, how land banks or this structure interacts with Superfund sites or other sites that have a significant toxic component to them in one way or the other?
That's a really great question, and I wish that I could give you like the most detailed answer to that I can. I have asked that same question, and I've been sitting there in awe as someone is able to really give me a 30-minute discussion. But what I can say is that for a municipality like Waterville that is working with a site that has some environmental liability and has some issue, some toxic issue that needs to be remediated, there are two advantages. Number one, right now, if the city of Waterville were to take on that property, you would be subject to certain fines and liabilities because you now own that site. Okay, so DEP would come down on you and say, you own this, this is your issue, you need to take care of it. If you have a legal land bank, you are shielded from that liability, so that makes up one huge piece of that advantage. The second thing that it offers is that because you are a land banking authority in the state of Maine, who also has a land banking authority, there is a pipeline to be able to bring money down that is not through the brownfields environmental funding structure that we currently have. So you have a secondary funding structure that can be used to remediate some of these environmental toxins. So we actually have, dare I say, sort of like a back door to some additional funding that we have not had in the past and have sorely needed, because we do have a lot of areas that need that kind of attention. So the primary advantage being circumventing certain types of environmental liability with regard to penalties and fines, not because anything that we've done, but because of, you know, residual liability as that property continues to sit and sit and sit.
So really, land banks are just structures for unsticking property that, because of the vagaries of the regulatory framework around them, have kind of been in limbo for forever, and it allows a municipality to move on properties, push it forward. What is the range of land bank authorized entities? So a municipality is, would a county, or like what, who is authorized? Are any private entities, can they hold land banks or not?
Not a private entity, but a nonprofit entity can have a land bank.
I see.
So the state will have its own land bank, and that's important to know. The state will have its own land bank that you can use this as the city of Waterville, even though you have or decide to go through with setting up your own land banking authority. You can use the state land bank. If you have a property that's big enough that for one of many reasons is too big for you to either devote the time, expertise, or resources to moving through that process, you can ask the state land bank to step in. And I think it's really important, as I mentioned, that this is a state level land bank that also has a number of state level resources, is that we're aiming to create a resource that is much different than the way that we often think of state level anything right now, in that there's a lot of we have your back kind of attitude that I'm trying to bake in here. So much of the time we call a state level agency, dare I say, and we say, listen, we have this problem, and we get an email PDF, and then they say we wash your hands of it, like you make sense of it. And that's really what you get. But what I'm hoping to bake into that a little bit more is someone that's or a structure that's they have your back, and they're right there every step of the way. If there's a particularly challenging property, you do not need to compete for those resources, the technical assistance, or even just hand-holding in terms of using the state level land bank for a larger piece of property. And so it looks like you have a follow-up.
Yeah, so say Waterville were to apply to the state land bank to manage a piece of property that's within our boundaries. Does that mean, so the advantage of that is that we are relieved of the administrative burden, as you're describing it. However, does that mean we relinquish discretion over the final outcome of that property? How does that work?
No, because you're really asking the state level land bank to do a defined set of things. So you would say, I have parcel X, I am requesting that you do Y and Z to this property, and then you're going to give it back to me. So you do not relinquish ownership of that property. You are just asking them to do a defined task to that property. And there are certain times, and this is where that super smart guy that I said he could spend 30 minutes talking about environmental remediation, there are particular circumstances in which you would find it more advantageous to hand a property to the state of Maine to say, wash this part of it and then give it back to me, because the state of Maine specifically is again shielded from certain types of action, more so than the city of Waterville. So then when they give you the property back, they're not giving you the property, you've always had the property, but when they complete that task, you would just continue to move on in the property disposition process. And if you have more plans for that property, you would continue to do that until you've identified a buyer and completed the sale.
So then what is the advantage of having a local land bank, a locally administrated land bank?
So I think a lot of it is institutional culture. There are many larger cities that prefer to do things their own way. There is also the pace. You can set your own pace, do things as quickly as you'd like to. And then, this isn't just about environmental issues. This is also, do you have a property that is, heavily mortgaged, has like 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 liens on it? Does it have, some uncertainties as to title in other ways? So there are several different layers of why you would want to have your own land bank, but larger municipalities tend to want to have their own because there's a lot more ownership involved. You're not having to, well, let's just say you don't have to wait your turn, right? There are advantages to that. Counties can have their own land bank and offer that to their municipalities as a whole, and then regional planning organizations such as KV-COG, we could consider operating a land bank for the benefit of our membership as well. There are smaller communities that are not well suited to having their own land bank, just simply by virtue of not having enough capacity, not having the knowledge base, and not having enough property to really make it worth it. So in those cases, they may look for a regional land bank. They may also look at Waterville and their land bank as, someone that they could enter into an interlocal agreement to do that one-off property that they might need to do. So that's another thing that you might consider when you look at your function of your land bank is, do we want to help one of our bedroom communities with 1 or 2 parcels a year for our bedroom communities? At what point do you decide that you would offer that service to the surrounding towns?
All right, Robin,
So-
thank you.
Go ahead.
We sort of have to move on from this.
Okay.
We got quite a few things, and I know that Tom's got some extra questions.
Oh, when it's 8 o'clock, I completely understand. I got things to do too. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
This was very helpful.
All right, reports, council meetings, council committees. Claude?
Yes, I read my report from the TIF committee earlier. Would you like me to read it again, or is it already in the public record?
Already in the public record.
Then I'll just say that the Comprehensive Plan Committee almost had an August meeting. However, it was just David Johnson, myself, and Ann Beveridge. So there's no report from the Comprehensive Plan Committee.
Any other committees? All right, seeing that, I'm going to move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few things to report on tonight. In the Code Enforcement Department, we have issued an order to the owners of the seafood sign out on KMD next to I-95 to have it taken down by October 7th. Otherwise, they'll be facing fines graduating from $100 to $500 a day.
Tried to buy it from them.
Well, it'd make a nice welcome to Waterville sign.
I wanted to buy it from them. I offered to buy it from them years ago.
The seafood sign?
Yeah, man.
Tom will take it down for him. Just give me Tom's contact.
Literally, yes, I would. I gave him my phone number.
Apparently, they'd rather pay us money than sell it to you. We'll see what we can do for you.
Okay.
The administrative assistant position in codes has been filled. You're going to be considering a vacant buildings ordinance tonight in its first reading. There has been feedback from the code enforcement officer that still has to go through legal review that makes reference to the building maintenance ordinance as a means of dealing with the penalties and incentives and the standards for upkeep of buildings. So we might just bring amendments to you at the second reading that would make reference to that ordinance. In the parks, I gave you a copy of a photo that was in the Sentinel on Saturday, I believe it was, an aerial view of the basketball court on North Street. It's an outstanding job that's been done on that court, and the tennis courts and the other basketball courts are going to be just as good. The paving on in the south end has completed phase 1, which is the reclaim and resurfacing of several streets and replacement of several sidewalks. The second phase is going to be the full depth reconstruction of I think it's 3 or 4 streets, including King Street and King Court. In the fire department, we have an offer out to the last of the 10 EMTs that we, 8 EMTs that we need to hire in order to staff fully for the addition of that second ambulance. Because of the quality of the applicants that we've gotten, we will have 2 paramedics on every shift in addition to 2 EMTs. That's far beyond the capability and quality of staff that we've had previously. The EMS deputy chief position and the EMS admin and training officer positions will be filled later this fall. And on the downtown visioning, you had the public input session earlier tonight. We have a planning meeting with Colby and BBB on Thursday this week, and the focus is expected to be on the schedule, the levels and composition of participation in the process, the public presentations and feedback, sequencing of the focal points within the project, and the lines of communication throughout. Video clips of the public input sessions are being sent to BBB so that there's nothing lost in translation by giving them a written transcript. And finally, I would ask the city clerk to introduce our new customer services manager and deputy city clerk.
Thank you. This is Brittany Garrett. Brittany has been with the city for a couple of weeks now. I wanted to bring her in to introduce her. She's the deputy city clerk, deputy tax collector, and customer service manager. She's doing a great job, and we're thrilled to have her, and I wanted to introduce her tonight.
Hi.
Welcome.
All done.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yep.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
CPAC always sounds like he's bidding on like storage lockers. Yup.
Is there a motion to read all the items by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right. Moving on to old business, order 182, 2022.
Accept property donation, Pine Ridge parcels.
Any discussion?
We need a motion.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Thank you.
Any discussion? This is just that parcel over there next to the ball field. Rummels? Good.
Mr. Mayor, I would ask that you attach an amendment to this that requires, excuse me, that the transitional documents come back to the council for approval of their content, because there will be conditions involved in this transaction, and I think you need to see them before you formally accept the gift.
Shouldn't we table it then instead of voting on it?
That's an option.
Can I get a motion?
We've already had one vote, but if there's still things that need to be worked out, I think we should probably go ahead and table.
And I'll second that. I second that. Let's get the paperwork cleaned up before we start doing anything.
Councilor Green.
Okay. I'm just wondering, this is in addition to the stipulation that it be named in honor of the donor's wife?
That's not clear at this date.
Okay, so we have some work to do to look at the conditions. Okay, yep.
Can I get a roll call on the table?
To table it to the next meeting?
Yep.
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yeah.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, moving on to Order 183, 2022.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Can I read it?
Yep.
Accept the 2022 Burn JAG Justice Assistance Grant. There's a motion and a second already.
All right,
Thank
good.
you.
Any discussion? Patty, can I get a roll call?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yeah.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
Moving on to Order 184, 2022.
Accept a Brownfields Site Assessment Grant.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Did Steve ever show up with that check?
I've got that check in my office. Any discussion? Patty, can I get a roll call?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yep.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, moving on to new business, Order 192, 2022.
Amendment to Airport Park Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District Development Program.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? We had some earlier. Seeing none, Patty, can I get a roll call?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yeah.
Counselor Green?
Could I just clarify what the amendment was to extend for 1 or 2 years? Do we have 1 or 2?
2.
2, okay, great. So,
Do we have to amend it, or does it already say 2?
I can't find it right now.
okay,
So let's just amend it to say 2?
yeah.
Can I get an amendment for 2 years?
So moved.
Second.
I got Claude and Tom McCormick. All right.
Okay, so we now have an amendment on the floor. We'll have to vote on the amendment.
Yep, let's get a roll call on that.
So the amendment is to amend to extend it for 2 years.
Gives us legal
Counselor
right.
DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed. Can we move it as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All set?
Yes, please, roll call.
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
Moving on to Resolution 193, 2022.
Approve issuance of a secondhand license to Eco ATM LLC.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I have questions. Patty, secondhand dealer's license, isn't this the little machine that's inside of Walmart?
Yes, they buy and sell used cell phones.
But do they actually sell them from there?
That's my understanding, yes.
I thought you could only trade them in. I did not know that you could buy them.
Well,
Whatever, I mean, we'll take the license. I just wanted to clarify. Any other questions?
What are they doing?
It's a machine. You take your old cell phones, you plug it into their machine, they read to see if it's got a broken screen, if it's software locked or anything else like that. And then they tell you, they'll say you put an iPhone 6 in there and they're like, well, it's worth $30 to us. It's like an electronic pawn shop.
All right. And it's gonna be at Walmart.
It's been there for years. They're just renewing their license.
now it's going to be at Shaw's.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Shaw's.
Yeah.
Second
This one's at Shaw's.
Second location. Apparently there's a
Okay.
market for used phones. I might have to go get another license. Any other discussion? Roll call, Patty.
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yep.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
Moving on to Resolution 194, 2022.
Authorize renewal of a special amusement license to SNL Productions Incorporated, doing business as Mainly Brews.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? Patty, can you get a roll call?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
Vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, moving on to Resolution 195, 2022.
Authorize renewal of a special amusement license to Travis LaJoy, doing business as 18 Below.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? Patty, can I get a roll call?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
Vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
Moving on to Order 196, 2022.
Accept the Stanton Foundation grant.
Can I
Move to adopt.
Second.
Steve, can you give us some info?
Just briefly, this is the acceptance of a grant totaling $47,500. It's a reimbursement grant for the acquisition of the canine dog that we have in the police department, plus the training of both the officer and the dog.
Dinsmore's been doing fantastic. Riggs is an awesome old dog. Any discussion? Can I get a roll call, Patty?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, moving on to Resolution 197, 2022.
Move to adopt. Oh, sorry.
Purchase authorization and waiver of bid process for an electric air compressor, Quarry Road.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? Do you want to tell us about it?
Just a quick intro on this. We have Matt Skane from the Public Works Department and Joe Reisert from the Friends of Quarry Road here to answer questions and provide a little bit more information than I will. But this is an acquisition of an air compressor for the snowmaking equipment at Quarry Road, which is currently being powered by leased equipment. The availability of such equipment is very sparse at this point in time, and the lead time for purchasing it otherwise is several months away, and we'll get beyond this winter season. The resolution that we're asking you to adopt would waive the bidding process because of the uniqueness of this acquisition, and would authorize the city manager to approve a $20,000 expense from the carry forward for Quarry Road. And I believe that the Friends of Quarry Road are going to contribute $20,000 toward it also. And then there's a tentative arrangement worked out to pay the balance of about $28,000 over a 2-year period. It's a good proposition for us. It's a necessary piece of equipment, and the financing arrangement is quite acceptable.
How much is it total?
68,000, is it?
64,000.
Shouldn't this be in order?
It is in order.
Says resolution, oh,
I didn't hear.
says resolution.
Yeah, it does.
Is it what?
Says resolution 197, should be order 197.
You are right. Please amend that.
And second question, I get waiving the bid process. I mean, it looks like a unique purchase. And we've discussed this previous when we did like the T-lift and stuff. Why don't they buy it and then we accept the product instead of having to waive bid processes like this? Like, why aren't they buying the air compressor and then donating the air compressor to us?
Well, sales tax.
They don't have the money for that.
Sales tax.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we want the carry forward money to go toward it. And the revenues accumulated over a couple of seasons to be reinvested.
Please speak into a microphone.
Sorry about that. Joe Reisert, Friends of Quarry Road. Yeah, so we didn't purchase it outright in part because we wanted the carry forward account to pay for essentially half of it. And that would require this process anyway. And the city is exempt from paying sales tax, so 5% of $64,000 is real money.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I just had to ask. Chairwoman Green.
So in the agenda packet, I thought I saw 2 other bids that were presented.
Right, we were asked to get 2 others so we could compare, and we had a very good sense of what they would come in at, and they came in just about where we expected them.
So
They're not available, though, like the one that's local, to be shipped upon notice.
right. So isn't that following the bid process? I mean,
Well, it wasn't formal, Councilor Green. We didn't put together the RFP and send out publicly,
Okay.
so that's what we missed, yeah.
But we did get other bids.
Correct.
Okay.
okay.
So the only other thing I would add, and thank you for coming, Joe and Steve, he summarized it very well, is that we applied for an efficiency main grant for up to $10,000 that we're, optimistic with any grant, but we feel pretty good about it, and we should hear back within the next month or 2. So that could help offset the cost as well.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Frankie.
I'm just a little bit troubled by the propensity of us to keep waiving the bid process, coming up with one little reason or another little reason. It seems to me that we've got so many exceptions to the bid process now that we really don't have a bid process. I'm going to oppose this simply on those grounds.
Councilor Green.
So my understanding is that, and I was happy to see that there were other bids provided, even if they didn't go through the official channels. But I'm just wondering if you'd speak to the reason for the need to move forward on this. I noticed that the delivery time was 15 to 20 weeks, was it? Which would put us into spring, I believe.
Right, 18 to 20 weeks.
Right.
Yeah. So what we learned through the process is that they are in very high demand, supply chain, lead time. I guess if we had learned sooner, we began really taking this seriously midsummer after a Friends of Quarry Road board meeting. So I think moving forward, we certainly will do our best to follow the formal bid process. But what we learned is that there are literally 2 of these units, on the East Coast, and one of them is being held for us. So we are anxious. We think that all the other numbers work out where we've been leasing for the last 10 years. All the numbers work out, but we just the process. I guess if we had seen this coming sooner, we would have been able to do the formal bid.
Right, and it will allow us to move from using a diesel-powered item to electric. Is that right? So there's a good environmental reason
Environmental,
to go ahead with this as well? Okay.
Counselor Klepak.
If I understand this correctly, we don't even really, please correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but we don't even really have a choice about being able to use diesel this year because we haven't reserved a diesel compressor, right? I mean, we're sort of.
It would be hard to find one. I mean, it might be possible, but normally we'd have reserved one by now.
Yeah.
Or Matt would have reserved one by now.
Can I get a motion to change this to an order?
So moved.
Second.
Patty, can I get a roll call on that motion?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
No.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 4 in favor and 1 opposed. We need to move it as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Patty.
All set now? Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
No.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 4 in favor and 1 opposed.
Yeah. Resolution 198, 2022.
Adopt a community resiliency partnership.
So moved.
Second.
Can I get some info on this?
Yeah.
Steve?
This is pretty much a policy statement by the council that's committing to reviewing our environmental sustainability in the city with the things that we buy, the things that we do, the things that we work on and create. Once you adopt this, there's an inventory that has to take place of all the different things that have to do with the environmental friendliness of the things that the city does and has. And part of that inventory will result in a series of action steps that then the council will be asked to adopt. And once that happens, it opens the door to a significant amount of funding to get those things done.
I got a question. So when you talk funding, do you talk about like grant funding? Okay, sorry. When you talk about funding, you talk about grant funding?
Grant funding, yes.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, so, well, just to add to that, as I understand it, this opportunity for grant funding and for resiliency planning requires that we complete an inventory of climate readiness for the city, hold a public forum input for to discuss that, and then adopt the resolution was the first thing. So those three tasks. So this will get us started by taking a look at what we have in place to address things like flooding and other potential climate-related hazards, and then prepare a list of action steps that we can take to build our resilience to these matters. And it's quite an extensive list of things that could possibly be addressed.
Like an electric compressor instead of a diesel one?
Right, exactly. So, right, leading to, I think, a more robust committee on climate resiliency, which some of us have been discussing.
Councilor Frankie.
I just wondered if the city manager or the council chair have spoken with the press about this so that it can be explained a little bit further in the newspaper.
Have not at this point, but certainly can and will.
Amy, if you're watching, give us a call. I mean,
she's on.
We'll get that, Claude.
She'll watch the video in the morning.
No, she's on right now. Yeah.
Yeah, she's on. All right, any other questions or comments?
Nancy Sanford online has a question.
All right, let Nancy in.
Hi, Nancy, can you hear us? Go ahead with your question.
I can, but I actually don't have a question. I just hit the raise hand.
Oh, okay.
Done deal.
Sorry.
I'll move you back.
Okay. I do have something during public comment, but I'll wait till public comment.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Patty can get a roll call.
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yeah.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
Vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
Moving on to ordinance 199, 2022.
Adopt a vacant and abandoned buildings ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? Go ahead, Steve.
The purpose of this ordinance, which has been discussed by the Housing Committee, I believe, for quite some time now, is to address blight in the community and to provide economic incentives, if you will, for property owners to maintain vacant buildings in a safe and healthful condition so that they aren't a threat to the neighborhood or from a health standpoint or a safety standpoint. It also addresses abandoned buildings, which refers right back to the state law that talks about abandoned buildings. And abandoned buildings are typically those where the owner has walked away and there may or may not be a mortgagor. And the mortgagor has rights, as do other people who may have a claim to the property, that you have to go through a variety of processes in order to foreclose on the property as the city. So this ordinance addresses straightforward the vacant buildings, keeping them safe, keeping them free of vermin and otherwise creating a relatively healthful condition in neighborhoods. And it has incentives that are punitive, thank you, for owners to keep the property up. And I think I mentioned that earlier during the public hearing, that it's $100 a day to $500 a day escalating. And I think it's straightforward. The first draft that we had of it was very verbose and quite confusing according to our city solicitor. So I took it upon myself to rewrite it this way, and I think it's a lot crisper and more direct.
What does the lawyer say?
He said the same thing. He hasn't offered any specific comments about it, but he did appreciate let's say, the brevity of it at this point. And if you vote to adopt it on this first reading tonight, if there are any comments that would warrant an alteration between now and the next meeting, we'll bring those to you as a set of amendments.
Councilor Frankie.
In your comments about the other night, Mr. City Manager, you said expressed that there were some concerns from the code enforcement officer.
Patty, can you mute McCormick? Sorry, Claude.
Have concerns of the code enforcement officer been addressed yet, or will they be are those things we might have to consider at the next meeting?
Those would have to be considered at the next meeting because they came in to me just today, and I didn't want to put that in front of the council tonight and confuse the issue. I think that if you are comfortable with the way that it's written now, if you adopt it, those changes are very simple to make in the next reading. It really just removes the sections that are fairly repetitious from the building maintenance ordinance and replaces them with a reference to that ordinance. But I want to be sure that we vet that correctly before we bring it back to the council.
Okay, good, thank you.
McCormick, can you mute yourself? Thank you. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, is the housing committee going to get some of this land bank stuff and find out that they're going to be wanting to put more amendments on top of the amendments, on top of what we're looking at tonight?
They're two separate ordinances.
I'm just looking at, is there going to be any override? That's all I was asking.
Are you talking about this particular ordinance? Because we're not yet addressing a land bank ordinance. We were just getting background information on the land bank tonight.
I didn't want you to find out that there was something in it that would affect this. That's all I was curious about.
Right. I mean, this particular ordinance was brought to the attention of the Housing Committee from the community of Sanford, which also has a land bank, so they are connected in a way. Obviously, if a property is abandoned, it could be taken eventually by the city, I believe, and placed in the land bank if we had a land bank. But I think what Steve's talking about is just redundancy with the property maintenance ordinance for this particular, what is it, ordinance 199. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And could you just review what the fee, the fines would be, or the fees would be for this ordinance? Because you mentioned 100 and 500, but that wasn't my understanding.
That was for the seafood.
Right. As I recall, it was $300 for a registration for the first 6 months.
You're correct.
Okay, and then
I was thinking of
accelerating.
something else when I said that.
Yeah, okay, just wanted to
Sorry.
clarify. Great.
Yeah, it's $300, and if it goes beyond by the way, these permits issued for vacant buildings will be 6 months in duration, and if the plan that the building owner has to submit as part of the application as to how they're going to make it a safe situation isn't completed within that 6-month time frame, then the next 6-month period, if they're given a permit, is 1.5 times the cost of that initial one. So that's the escalation. It goes 1.5 times the previous permit price. Thank you
Right.
for help catching me on that.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Patty, can I get a roll call?
Counselor DeBrito?
Yes.
Counselor Klepak?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor McCormick?
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, moving on to public comments. Can we get Nancy in?
Yes.
I want to thank Nancy. That's how you say your name? Yeah. Especially for working on this last ordinance that we did on the Housing Committee.
Paula.
Yeah. Paula, sorry. I got my names all over the place right now.
Hey, Nancy.
Hi. I have some thoughts about College Avenue, which I was planning to share at this meeting before the tragic fatal accident there last Thursday. But the accident illustrates my point, since speed was reported to be a likely element in the cause of the accident. I have lived in Waterville since 1988 and on May Street since 1991. So I have traveled College Avenue thousands of times. Over the years, the speed at which traffic travels on College Avenue has done nothing but increase. Many times when I drive on College Avenue, I have other motorists following me too closely because I dare to drive the speed limit. Cars also weave in and out of the two lanes in either direction, so they can maintain whatever speed they are going. I cringe every time I see a pedestrian crossing College Avenue, fearing a car will not be able to slow down in time so as not to hit them. There are only 3 pedestrian crosswalks, I believe, on College Avenue. One at the post office, one where Hazelwood Avenue intersects College Avenue, and at the Hutamaki factory. With all the recent talk of slowing down traffic on Main Street, I hope some attention can be paid to slowing down traffic on College Avenue. One idea is to install a full set of traffic lights and crosswalk somewhere near Cumberland Farms. That is where I notice most people trying to cross College Avenue. And thanks for listening to my concern.
Putting up a light over there makes sense to me. Slowing down that traffic doesn't. I mean, College Ave is what, 35 miles an hour?
Yes.
Yeah. I thank you very much, Nancy, especially, as you say, in light of the tragic accident that we had this past week. I will say that when we discussed implementing a CC1 zone on College Avenue at the Housing Committee, the concern about the speed of traffic was mentioned. And we, at that time, talked about things we could do to slow things down, because that pace isn't really conducive to a residential area. So I think we should take a look at this and see if what we can do to prevent it from becoming a highway or any more than it is already.
Steve.
As a point of information, before we go forward in approaching Maine DOT about this, it is a state highway, and I believe it is also US 202 or 201. So it involves the federal government and the state government. We don't have control over signals out there, but we can certainly talk to them about the potential for installing signals or other devices to make the crossings safer.
All right. Any other public comments? Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
God, I will say that a light or a crosswalk over by Cumberland Farms makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Especially because you're going to have that housing development over there.
Right. I mean, another thing that we discussed was implementing bike lanes or some sort of border in the middle of the street to with plantings of some kind. I don't know if that's permissible by Maine DOT, but worth looking at.
Since we're talking about streets and traffic and people driving, is there any way to make that second lane over by Walmart also turn left? Like, they should be able to go straight or left into the parking lot. There's 2 lanes going into that Walmart parking lot. Why can't both those left lanes be able, the one all the way to the left has to turn left, but that second one, turn left or go straight. That way you don't back up all of those vehicles up into the intersection. Some of those roads you can't pass during the day, and if we can't connect those 2 properties, then giving somebody that second left alternative will alleviate some of that. Other people can go straight, and then somebody else can turn left. You'll stop that sort of traffic jam right there on the corner there.
I think the problem with that, Jay, is that although it's infrequently used, the left from the opposing direction is open at the same time into the, whatever that is, the hotel there, the Best Western or whatever that is. And so if, for that to happen, that would preclude through traffic. You'd have to really juggle the timing of all those lights, right? Because otherwise you would significantly shorten the length of time that the people would be able to turn left into Walmart, which is just as important as the number of lanes that are open.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm wrong. I think that's.
I think it only keeps.
I'm correct with
I
that.
think that left is only open for like 15 seconds. It's not a lot of time for people to go into that parking lot. I mean, another way to alleviate that traffic is to get both owners of those two properties to put in a small little road so you can go from the Walmart parking lot to the Hannaford parking lot without having to come out to the street.
Let's just put in a roundabout.
Yeah, I'm good with that too. I'm not
Put
afraid
in
of.
a
I'm not afraid of a rotary.
We'll look into it.
Anyone else? All right, moving on to councilor comments.
I'd like to go on record as agreeing with Claude that we got to do something about the bid process. I'm in agreement with Claude for once. We got to clean that up.
I'm agreeing with him also.
Fine. Anybody else agree with Claude before we go?
I agree with Claude. No, I do agree with what he said. It makes sense, but I kind of see how short time frame that they had to deal with, especially from the summer towards the winter, trying to get something down there. I also understand that.
I think dealing with it, not only, I think there's two parts to that. One is complying with the ordinance more strictly than we have been, and my understanding is that this has been a historical thing that's developed over time. But the other is that we may want to address the ordinance and see if there are changes that we want to make to it that address situations like we encountered tonight.
Yeah, 'cause I'll say I've been on the council now for 2 years, and we have, Claude's been here longer, but we have waived the bid process since I've been here maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, about that.
Something like that. And I never once in any of those times felt like we were doing it irresponsibly. There are extenuating circumstances that I never felt like we were failing our fiduciary responsibility to the city by waiving that process. Certainly in this instance, I think we made the correct choice. I understand that his stance on principle. I would have been much more upset if it hadn't passed, for principle's sake.
All right, anything else? Oh, Councilor Green.
I just want to mention a request that I heard from a resident of Waterville, again, to move public comment to the beginning of the meeting so that people can present their points of view right then and not have to wait till the end of the meeting. So I'm hoping that we can
move that
make
around.
that change. Okay.
I'll move that.
But, okay, I got a question I got a comment with that. At the end of the meeting, doesn't that allow them to actually listen to the city council meeting? Because by giving that option right early in the meeting, doesn't it mean that they're gonna come, just give their, I don't know.
Well, it also means that they would be giving their comment at a time when more people were actually present to hear them. So,
If I'm not mistaken, Winslow does theirs right at the beginning.
yeah.
And then they sort of like leave it there. Because once people talk for public comment, that's essentially the only opportunity they get to speak on some things. Which I don't want to do. I mean, if you want to speak at public comments, great. But when we talk about another issue, they should be able to chime in on that issue also. I don't want to stop them, but we should try that next meeting. Go ahead.
Just to input to the discussion, in my experience, I've seen it done both ways. And typically, in my experience, public comments at the end of a meeting are an open forum to speak about whatever is on their mind, having to do with the local government. Public comments at the beginning of the meeting are typically restricted to agenda topics and with strict time limits also, and that can work very effectively. So those are just two ways I've seen it done.
Yeah.
And it feels
And I-
like we're doing both right now. I mean, we are doing both right now, but
Yes,
with
we are.
specific topic in the beginning, and we have the public comment in the end.
But we give them an opportunity to speak on each item.
Right.
They don't have to wait for public comments to speak on an item.
Yeah.
They can do so while it says so right here in the beginning. You guys get an opportunity to speak, then the public gets an opportunity to speak, and then it comes back to you. So they do get that opportunity to sort of change your mind or get you to see it their way before you take a vote, which I like that better than letting them speak once in the beginning and then not caring about the next or what they have to say based on that resolution. If they didn't speak their mind in the beginning, they don't get a chance. I don't like that. I want them to have more opportunity to speak for the public is better than less. I think we're gonna try that next meeting, public comment first. Clouds and Frankie.
Well, here's just a thought, and I haven't really thought this through at all. But occasionally we have somebody like Robert Stanecki who came and had a presentation at the beginning of the meeting tonight. And if it seems to me that if there are members of the public that have something important to say like that, that we can put them on the agenda first thing. I don't know. I haven't thought about it, but it's, we do have people come and speak to us at the beginning of the meeting if they're going to make a long presentation or an important presentation. So that's one of the things we might want to consider.
All right. Well, when you finish thinking about it, can you get back to me? All right. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.